Hello and welcome to this recording on getting started with the Sophos Cloud Optix API using curl. So in this recording, I'll be showing you how you can start to interact with the exposed API when you have a Sophos Cloud Optix environment. So, and the curl command, so it allows us to query URLs from the command line, and we can make regular HTTP, HTTPS requests. We can even post form data. We can post other types of data. We can authenticate users. We can save responses to file. So it's a very robust tool. So actually, many people may not be aware of this, but curl actually supports other popular network protocols like FTP, FTPS, SCP, and many other protocols like that. But in this particular request, because the transport with the Sophos Cloud API is HTTPS, so we'll be focusing on that. So a quick disclaimer and clarification before going further. So this is not a deep dive video. So it's very important to say that because sometimes you have comments with people saying why didn't you go deeper and all that stuff. So it's very good to clarify what's the purpose behind this video. Here's my main goal with this video. I want to keep things simple. I'm not going to get into the different complexities. I'm not going to get into the more advanced stuff. So nevertheless, my expectation is that this video should give you a good foundation that you can build on, something that will allow you to be able to do or implement more cooler integration with the Sophos Cloud Optix API and do some much more interesting stuff, which I'll actually show you some of that in the video that I'll be making after this when I talk about integrating with the Jenkins pipeline and how the API can help you in that case. So here's the agenda that I'll try to cover for today. So number one, let's enable the API in a Sophos Cloud Optix account. So I have a test account that I'll be showing these on. So number two is going to do a Sophos Cloud Optix API documentation review. So a lot of the stuff that I'll be showing you um, once you see like how to use them, you may want to explore things further. So that's where the documentation comes in, and that can help you and give you many aspects to what we're not going to be able to cover in a single short video. So number three is I'm going to show you how to authenticate to the Sophos Cloud Optix API if you're making a request using curl. And then number four, we get into some of the examples. So things like the alert count examples, how you can do filtering, things like the alert example, how you can do filtering with that, things like if you want to post certain configuration, in this case using the IP Whitelist API endpoint, how you can do that. So we'll get into that. So let's start with that. So the system that I'll be using, it's a Windows machine that has Windows subsystem for Linux enabled. So you could be using a Linux machine or a Mac machine. Again, as long as the curl tool is supported on that machine, you're good. So I'll get into this. Let's go into Bash, my Windows subsystem for Linux. And let's do the very first thing, which is enable API on a Sophos Cloud Optix account. Okay, so let's go into Sophos Cloud Optix. I'm already signed into my environment. If I go under settings under integrations, I have the API option here. I can click on that option and I can generate a new key. It's going to generate a new key for me. I'll need to make a note of that key because I'll need that key for later. So let me make a note of that somewhere here. Good. I can set the expiry time, never 1 year or 6 months. I'll set it to 6 months for now. I'm getting rid of all of this after these videos anyway. But just to show you how that's configured. And I'll go ahead and click save to that. And it's going to download the API key as a text file, so it's something I can keep in a credential database somewhere, and then keep that secure. So let's move on to the second topic on our agenda, which is the Sophos Cloud Optix API documentation review. So for this, if I go back to the Optix console again, and I click on the menu over here, um, just right down here, you see a link here that takes you to the Sophos Cloud Optix API documentation. If I click on that link, it takes you to that documentation. So just keep this in mind. You want to get familiar with this document if you're going to be working with the Sophos Cloud Optix API. The reason being that I'm going to be showing you certain examples in this, but then you want to take things further. So for example, I'll show you an example, some examples of using the parameters when you're making some API calls. And I'm probably going to be using just a single parameter to demonstrate that. But then you can go into the documentation here, and then you can have a look at all the different possible parameters, what the values are for those parameters, and then you can get more familiar with the API that way. So that's the benefit of um, getting yourself familiar with this document. So let's move on to the next step, which is authenticate to the Sophos Cloud Optix API. So for that authentication demo aspect, what I'll be doing is I'll be using the um, IP Whitelist API endpoint of Optix to show this to you. And I'll just drag this so I know what I'm talking about. So that's number 3, that's what I'm describing. The other thing, just to give you like a visual representation of what I did earlier, was I created an API key in Optix, and I'll be needing the value of this key if I'm going to be making API calls, because that's how I authenticate to the endpoint. So let's go back down here. I need my key. So for me to authenticate, I'm going to need the URI that I'm going to be making the request to, and I'm going to need the value of my API key. And because I'm using call, I'll show you what this looks like. So here's what the call command looks like for that particular use case. So let's get rid of all of that. Let's make things a bit cleaner here. Here we go. So I have call, I have the method, which I'm just doing a get, and the API endpoint that I'm going to, because I'm going to another line here. And then I'm specifying -h for the header. And I'm specifying an header with the key of authorization and the value of API key space the value of my API key. So what I'll do is I'll go get the value of my API key, and I'll replace this. So that's what I have. So let's scroll down a bit to make this a bit clearer. There we go. So what I'll do is if I just copy this, I actually don't need that, but if I just copy this. And to show you like what I currently have configured in the whitelist, IP whitelist section of Optix, if I go back to my Optix account, if I go under IP whitelist, you can see that I have a single whitelist configured 1.1.1.1. And the whitelist is used by the AI engine of Sophos Cloud Optix to exclude certain IP addresses from the alert. So maybe certain trusted IP addresses are excluded from the anomaly detection that the AI engine of this solution does. So let's copy that. Let's go to my command line. I'm going to paste that. I'm going to press enter. And there we go. So that's completed now. So I know that, because of the way that JSON is formatted, you can see it's a bit messed up a little bit. So if I do, so what I could do, and it's also very useful for you, I can use it too. For example, let's see, JSON PP to format it in a nicer way. So that it looks much nicer than what I got in the initial request. And there you go. You can see that this is formatted in a better way than what this looks like. So there you go. So that's kind of like the authentication. So let's move on from here. So let's go to, so now let's start showing you some more examples. What about if I want to start playing around with the alert count? So let's do that next. So get rid of that and that. So get alert count example. Let's show you how you're going to be working with that. So for that, I need a different URI endpoint, not the whitelist endpoint, because it's the alert count, which gives me the statistics for the alert. So I'll be needing that URI. The other thing to mention is I only have one Azure subscription onboarded into my Optix environment. So if you have multiple, you'll be able to get multiple statistics and be able to do different types of filtering. But I'll show you based on the single Azure subscription that I have onboarded. So if I go there, I'll need my API key also. So what will the command look like for this? So let's go over here and I'll do this again. So here you go. So it's very simple again because that's the get method that I'm using. That's the API endpoint that I'm interacting with. I'm going to need my authorization, which is my um, API key. So I'll need that. And so, and if I wanted to, again, I could go JSON PP to format it in a nice way. So let's go run this in the command line. So let's clear the screen. Let's paste that. And that gives me kind of like a statistics of all the alerts that I currently have within my Optix environment. And this is where the use of the parameters come in. So let's go back to the documentation. So now I've got that value, but what if I want to start filtering things? So for example, if I want to get a count of the different alerts for a particular provider, maybe I don't want to get this for all the providers. Maybe I want to specify a particular provider. How would I do that? Now, if you're using something like curl, one of the things that you can do, so let's go back to this, is I'll get a different command over here, and I'm gonna replace this. And so you can see here, so I'm beginning to do something here. So that's my API endpoint where I had a question mark at the end. And what the question marks, when I append the question mark to the URL, so what I indicate, it indicates the start of a query string. So, and the query string is referring to parameters that I'm going to be using to filter this particular query. So in this case, I'm specifying just show me alerts that are suppressed. I currently don't have any suppressed, so I expect to get no data back from this request. And let's see, maybe I've got something wrong here. So let's go back here. Let me pick another parameter to use. So I'm going to specify provider list, and I'm going to specify Azure in this case. So let's go provider list, and I'm going to change this to Azure. And I need to, oh, I can see why that failed. I need to replace this with the value of my API key. So that's why the original one failed actually. So I need my API key there. So let's go copy this. Let's clear the screen to keep things clean. Let's run that, and it's giving me only the alerts that relates to the Azure provider. So if I wanted to, I could go modify this again just to filter for alerts that has to do with the AWS provider. Execute this. I expect nothing back because I've not onboarded any AWS environment, so I expect that will be nothing, and you can see that that's nothing indeed. So that's where you can begin again to use the parameters to filter for like particular values that you want. So if I have a particular cloud platform account, it could be Azure, it could be AWS, it could be Google Cloud, it could be Kubernetes, it could be an infrastructure as a code environment like GitHub or Bitbucket. I could specify the account ID and filter for only the alert count for that particular account ID. So enough of that, let's move on to the next one. So um, let's see. The next one is we're going to be talking about, let's copy this. Let's get rid of this. So let's see. So that is alert count example. So let me show you like the alert example. So that's just the statistics. What about the actual alerts themselves? Let's see. Get rid of that. Let's move this. So I need a different URI for the API endpoint for this. So let's go to get the right API endpoint, which is this. And by the way, if you've not figured out already, these are the exposed API endpoint in Cloud Optix at the moment. So that's the URI that I'm querying, and of course I'll need my API key value for my authentication. So what would this particular request what will it look like? So let's give you an example of this. So there you go. If I paste this, so you can see that again I have my URI, my API endpoint, But in this particular case, I'll need to specify at least this parameter value. If I don't specify page parameter value, I'll get an error. Page has to be specified and you have to start at 1 because that's the page of the different alert, and I can specify the number of alerts to return. By default, it's going to return 20. If you have multiple, recommendation is not to go beyond 50 when you're returning that. I'll need to replace that again with my API key. So let's get my API key and let's replace that. Okay, so one thing that I forgot to do earlier, so I figured out why that was going wrong, was I did not, so because I'm using multiple parameters in this case, so I'm not only specifying one parameter. So I'm specifying page parameter, but I'm also specifying the size parameter, and I'm using the ampersand symbol. So then I'll need to put like a single quote. So that was what I was missing. So once you put that, and if I go run execute this query, and you can see that it's returning my alert. And again, if I wanted to, I could play around with this. If I wanted to return maybe 10 alerts from the first page, I can go ahead and execute that, and that will return, rather than return 1, it's going to return 10 alerts, and you can see that that's quite a lot, right? And then it's going to give you more information. And of course, you can filter based on any of these. So if I want to specify severity, if I want to specify account provider, if I want to specify account ID, and all those different parameters. And again, you can start playing around with the parameters that you have over here. So for example, I specified the one for page and size, but you could as well specify the one for state, for severity, for all the others. Okay, so that's the one for the alerts. Let's move on to probably like the final one, which is let me show you like for the post IP whitelist example. So let's do that. So this one we're going to be actually modifying configuration. It's not just getting information out of optics, but it's actually doing some configuration. And for that, I need a different endpoint because that's the IP whitelist endpoint. So I'll need this endpoint in this case. And I need my API key also. So the other thing that I'll do is let's get rid of that. Let's get the right example for you. So here's an example of how I'll use this. So let's make that longer, and there you go. So this time around, I'm not using the get method, I'm using the post method. That's my API endpoint that I'm interacting with. I'll need to replace that with my API key. Let's get the key again. That's my key. Now I need to specify what's the format of the data that I'll be posting. In this case, it's going to be JSON that the endpoint accepts or expects. What's the account that I'm going to be, what's the account I'm going to applying this whitelist to? Is it for all accounts? That's why I'm specifying now. And if you want to find out more, again, one way that you can find out what format or how to format the data that you're posting is you just do a get request against this API. And once you do a get request against this API, it's going to return that information. And then based on that information, you can see how you need to format this. So in this case, I currently, if I go back here, I have 1.1.1 specified. So now I'm posting 2.2.2.2 and 3.3.3.3. And that's the specifying the data that I'm posting. So that's what I want to post. Let's move these up a bit so that we see the entire content. If I copy this, and then if I go back to the environment, and if I run that, and if I press enter to that, so I can see a success. So if I don't get an error message, that means it's successful. So that's good. So if I go back to this, if I click out and click back to that, now you can see that it successfully accepted the configuration that I just posted. So the method I just showed you, I specified the data that I'm posting. I specified that as part of my command. There are certain use cases where the data that I want to post is so large that I may not want to specify that as part of the command. I want to specify that as part of a file. So How do I do that? So let's do a clear. Is how I would do that. So one thing that I'll do, or the first thing that I'll do is I'll go to create a file. So I'll create a file and then I'll add the content that I just did now. I'll add that content into the file. So for example, if I take this account ID over here, so that's data and that's the end of the account ID. So we've got two. So let's go back up. So I'll create a new file called IP Whitelist.json that will contain that data. And then once I've done that, then I'll go ahead and I'll do a post. But this time around, rather than specify my data, I'm going to specify my file. So I'm going to pass my file into that. So that's what I'll do. So let's go ahead and do that. But before I do that, let's go, because I've just added that data here. So I'm going to get rid of them, submit, make sure all that is all good and saved. If I go back on the IP whitelist, I only have 1.1.1.1 here. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I do vim IP whitelist.json and I have my empty file here, so let's go get the data that I'm gonna add to this. I'm gonna get that data and I'm gonna add that data there. So everything looks good. I'll go ahead and save this file and that's done. So if I do a card IP whitelist.json, I can see the data that's in that. So then the next thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll now post my data specifying my data file, my JSON file. So if I go ahead and copy that, and if I go over here and if I paste that, and I get the same results that it's successful. Now, if I go back to my Optix environment, if I click out of that and click back, you can see that it successfully added this. So that's how you do that. So hopefully this has been useful to you. So in the very next video recording, I'm going to show you something very cool. And I'll just give you a brief overview of what I'm going to be showing you. I'm going to be showing you how to integrate Optix into your Jenkins pipeline to create a secure pipeline, to begin to integrate security into your pipeline. And this is what I'm going to be showing you. Obviously not everything because of time. I don't want the video to go too long. I'm going to be showing you this aspect. How do I integrate Optix into my pipeline to create a secure pipeline? So watch out for the next video. Thanks very much for watching this one, and I'll see you the next time. Thank you.